They were planning to declare me mentally incompetent so they could steal everything I had worked for. The words still echo in my mind like a death sentence. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if you, for even a second, feel that this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe, because this story might help someone draw closer to God's love. Amen. My name is Judith Elaine Walker, and I am 68 years old. I live in a house on the outskirts of Minneapolis that once echoed with laughter and family gatherings, but now holds only the steady ticking of an old grandfather clock and the whispered prayers I offer each morning and night. The silence has become so profound that sometimes I find myself speaking aloud just to hear a human voice, even if it's only my own. I wake each morning at 5:30, just as I have for the past 40 years. My routine begins with coffee, always in the same blue ceramic mug that William gave me on our 10th anniversary, the one with the small chip on the handle that I've refused to replace because it carries his fingerprints in its imperfection. I sit at the kitchen table where we shared thousands of meals, where we discussed our children's futures and planned vacations we thought we'd take together, and I read my Bible by the soft light of the lamp he installed specifically for my morning devotions. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want," I whisper, running my fingers over the worn pages of Psalm 23. These words once brought me comfort, but lately they feel like questions rather than promises. Where is my shepherd now? What does it mean to not want when everything I thought I had has been stripped away? I was married to William for 38 years. A good man, a faithful husband, a devoted father who never missed Sunday service, and who taught our children to say grace before every meal. He was a lawyer who fought for justice with the same passion he brought to everything else in his life. He died suddenly in a courtroom, collapsing while defending a client he believed in. An aneurysm, the doctor said. Instant. Painless, they assured me, though nothing about losing him felt painless. The cruelest irony was that I wasn't there when it happened. I was in surgery, working to repair a stranger's damaged heart, while my husband's heart was stopping forever. After spending my entire career as one of the first female cardiologists at Minneapolis General Hospital, after saving countless lives and proving myself in a profession that questioned whether women had the strength and knowledge to heal hearts, I couldn't save the one heart that mattered most to me. For 45 years, I dedicated my life to medicine. I worked double shifts when our children were young, missing school plays and soccer games, so I could pay for their education, their music lessons, their summer camps. I endured the whispered doubts of male colleagues who questioned whether a woman could handle the pressure of cardiac surgery. I proved them wrong, one successful operation at a time, until they finally stopped questioning my competence and started respecting my expertise. When I retired 5 years ago, they threw me a party. Colleagues spoke about my contributions to the field, my mentorship of young doctors, my role in breaking barriers for women in medicine. They said I had made history, but history, I've learned, can be a terribly lonely place when the people you made it for have moved on to make their own lives. Thomas and Rebecca, my 2 children, now adults with families of their own. Thomas is 42, a successful financial advisor with a wife named Emily, and 2 teenage children I barely know. Rebecca is 39, a marketing executive who married a software engineer and gave me 3 grandchildren whose voices I recognize more from holiday phone calls than from actual conversations. They are both accomplished, well-educated, financially stable, everything William and I worked so hard to help them become. But success, I've discovered, doesn't guarantee gratitude. Love doesn't ensure loyalty. And raising children with Christian values doesn't guarantee they'll treat you with Christian kindness when you become inconvenient to their plans. The phone calls started becoming less frequent about 2 years after William's death. At first, I told myself it was natural. People move on, life gets busy, grief affects everyone differently. The visits became shorter, conversations more superficial. When they did come to the house, it was usually because they needed something: a loan for a down payment, help with unexpected medical bills, assistance with their children's college expenses. "Mom, I hate to ask, but we're a bit behind on the mortgage this month," Thomas would say. not quite meeting my eyes, his voice carrying that particular tone of embarrassment mixed with expectation that I'd come to know so well. Evan needs a new laptop for college, and the cheapest decent one is $200, Rebecca would explain, already pulling out her phone to show me the specifications as if my agreement was a foregone conclusion. "You're not really using your savings anyway, are you, Mom?" they'd ask, as if my financial security was somehow less important than their immediate needs, as if the money I'd earned through decades of saving sick hearts was just sitting idle, waiting for them to find a use for it. And I gave, every time, because that's what mothers do, because William had left us comfortable, and because I believed that helping your children was what love looked like in practical terms, because saying no felt selfish, unchristian, contrary to everything I'd been taught about family loyalty and sacrificial love. But no one ever asked how I was sleeping. No one wondered if I felt lonely in this big house that held so many memories. No one inquired about my health, my dreams, my fears about aging alone. The conversations were always about what I could provide, never about what I might need. Last Tuesday morning, everything changed. I was upstairs in my bedroom, looking for a book I wanted to lend to my neighbor, when I heard voices in the kitchen below. Thomas and Rebecca had come for what they called a family meeting, supposedly to discuss my birthday plans, though their tone suggested something far more serious. I was about to call down to them when I heard my name spoken in a way that made me freeze at the top of the stairs. "Mom's getting worse," Rebecca was saying, her voice carrying the clinical detachment she usually reserved for her work presentations. "Did you see how she forgot what day it was last week? And she's been repeating the same stories over and over." "Doctor, Lewis already said he'd be willing to write the assessment," Thomas replied, and the casual way he said it made my blood turn cold. "We just need to document a few more incidents. Maybe get her to sign some papers while she's confused." They were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent. My own children, the babies I had nursed and rocked and sung to sleep, were discussing my mind as if it were a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. "The house alone is worth almost $800,000, Rebecca continued. "And with her retirement accounts and investments, we're talking about serious money. Money that's just sitting there while we're struggling with our own expenses." They laughed then, actually laughed, as if my supposed mental decline was amusing rather than tragic, as if the prospect of controlling my life and assets was cause for celebration rather than sorrow. I sank down on the top step, my hand pressed against my mouth to keep from making a sound that would reveal my presence. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might wake the dead, and for a moment I wondered if this was how William felt in those final seconds. The sudden realization that everything you thought you knew about your life was about to change forever. That night, I sat alone in my living room with all the lights turned off, holding my Bible in hands that trembled with a combination of fear and rage and heartbreak I'd never experienced before. The grandfather clock ticked its steady rhythm, marking the passage of time that suddenly felt precious and threatened. Through the windows, I could see my neighbors' houses glowing with warm yellow light, families gathering for dinner, children being tucked into bed by parents who loved them unconditionally. "Lord," I whispered into the darkness, "if this is what my life has become, if the children I raised and loved and sacrificed for see me as nothing more than an obstacle to their financial security, then please, show me what you want me to do. Give me strength. Give me wisdom. Don't let me be humiliated like this." The tears came then. Not the gentle tears of grief I'd shed for William, but the angry, desperate tears of betrayal. These were the children I had prayed over every night when they were small, the babies whose fevered foreheads I had cooled with damp washcloths, the teenagers whose broken hearts I had mended with ice cream and patient listening. I had worked extra shifts to pay for their education, postponed my own dreams to fund theirs, given them every advantage my love and labor could provide. And this was how they saw me now. Not as their mother, but as an aging woman whose mind was failing and whose assets were too valuable to leave in her own control. Not as someone deserving of respect and care, but as a problem to be managed and ultimately solved through legal manipulation and medical documentation. I thought about William, about how proud he had been of our children's accomplishments, how he had bragged about their successes to anyone who would listen. What would he think if he could see them now? What would he say about the people our babies had become? As I sat there in the dark, clutching my Bible and listening to the clock mark another hour of my uncertain future, I remembered something William used to say about justice. Sometimes, he would tell me after a particularly difficult case, the truth takes time to emerge, but when it does, it changes everything. I had no idea then how prophetic those words would prove to be. The next morning, I found myself staring at a photo album I hadn't opened in years. The leather cover was worn smooth from handling, filled with pictures that told the story of a family I thought I knew. But now, looking at these frozen moments of birthday parties and Christmas mornings, I wondered if I had been blind to warning signs that were always there. There was Thomas at age 8, arms crossed and pouting because I couldn't attend his school play. I had been performing emergency surgery on a father of 3 who might not have made it home otherwise. Rebecca at 12, rolling her eyes when I suggested she thank her grandmother for the expensive ballet lessons I was secretly paying for. Even then, even as children, they had learned to see my sacrifices as obligations rather than gifts of love. I remembered the year Thomas wanted to attend a private summer camp that cost more than I made in 2 months. William thought it was too expensive, but I took on extra weekend shifts, worked Christmas and New Year's Eve, slept in the hospital break room between surgeries to save on gas money. When Thomas came home with stories of archery competitions and canoeing adventures, he never once asked how we had afforded to send him. It simply never occurred to him that someone had paid a price for his happiness. Rebecca's wedding 5 years ago cost us nearly $40,000. She had insisted on having it at the country club where her friends had been married, with a 12-piece orchestra and imported flowers that would wilt within days. I liquidated part of my retirement savings to pay for it, telling William it was what parents did for their children's special moments. But the night before the wedding, I overheard Rebecca complaining to her bridesmaids that the centerpieces weren't tall enough, that the champagne wasn't expensive enough, that nothing was quite as perfect as she had dreamed. "At least it's not my money," she had laughed, adjusting her $3,000 dress. "Mom's paying for everything anyway." Not Mom and Dad, just Mom. As if I was some wealthy benefactor, rather than her mother who had worked double shifts for months to make her dream wedding possible. As if the money appeared magically, rather than being earned through 60-hour work weeks and sleepless nights spent worrying about patients who depended on my skill and knowledge. I closed the album and walked to my desk, where I kept careful records of every financial gift I had given them over the years. The numbers were staggering. Thomas's college tuition, $120,000. Rebecca's graduate school, $85,000. Down payment for Thomas's first house, $50,000. Rebecca's car after her accident, $28,000. Emily's medical bills when she had complications during her second pregnancy, $15,000. Christmas gifts, birthday presents, emergency loans that were never repaid. The total exceeded $400,000. $400,000. More than many people earn in a lifetime. Given freely, lovingly, without expectation of repayment because that's what family meant to me. But looking at these numbers now, I realized I had been funding their lives while they planned to take control of mine. The phone rang, interrupting my painful calculations. It was Rebecca, her voice bright with artificial cheer. "Hi, Mom. I was just thinking about you. How are you feeling today?" The question that should have warmed my heart instead made me suspicious. When had Rebecca started asking about my feelings? When had she begun showing concern for my daily well-being? "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said carefully, wondering if this call was part of their plan to document my supposed mental decline. "That's wonderful. Listen, I was talking to Thomas and we think it might be time for you to meet with a financial advisor. You know, just to make sure everything is organized properly. For your peace of mind." Peace of mind. The phrase felt like a knife twist. My peace of mind was exactly what they were trying to destroy. "I appreciate your concern," I said, "but I've been managing my finances for 45 years. I think I can handle them for a while longer." There was a pause, the kind of silence that spoke volumes. "Of course, Mom. It's just that, well, sometimes after a certain age, it helps to have professional guidance." Dr. Lewis was saying. "Dr. Lewis?" I interrupted. "Why would you be discussing my finances with Dr. Lewis?" Another pause. "Oh, We just ran into him at the grocery store. You know how he worries about his older patients. He mentioned that it's common for people to need extra help with complex decisions as they age. I felt my face burn with anger and humiliation. They had been discussing me with my own doctor, planting seeds of doubt about my mental capacity, building a case for their eventual legal action. How long had this been going on? How many people in my small community had heard whispered concerns about my supposedly failing mind? "Rebecca," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am not experiencing any mental decline. I am not confused about my finances. And I am not in need of a guardian or conservator. Is that clear?" "Mom, no one said anything about guardianship. We just want to help." "Help whom?" I asked. "Help me? Or help yourselves?" The line went quiet. Then Rebecca's voice returned, colder now, more clinical. "I think you're getting upset over nothing. Maybe we should talk about this when you're feeling more balanced." Balanced. Another word to add to their documentation. Another piece of evidence that Judith Walker was becoming emotionally unstable, prone to paranoid thoughts and irrational reactions. After I hung up, I found myself thinking about all the times I had ignored red flags, all the moments when I should have questioned their motives, but chose instead to believe in their love. Last Christmas, when Thomas had suggested I should consider simplifying my living situation, Emily's pointed comments about how dangerous it was for elderly people to live alone in large houses, Rebecca's sudden interest in my will and estate planning, I walk through my house, seeing it now through their eyes. The Persian rugs William and I had saved for years to afford, they probably saw dollar signs. The antique furniture inherited from my grandmother, valuable assets to be appraised and sold. The paintings we had collected during our travels, investments to be liquidated rather than memories to be cherished. Even my medical awards and diplomas, displayed proudly in my study, probably meant nothing to them beyond their potential estate sale value. 45 years of dedicating my life to healing others, of breaking barriers for women in medicine, of saving lives and training the next generation of doctors, all reduced to items in an inventory. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my old friend Margaret, another retired doctor who had understood the challenges of being a woman in medicine. We had supported each other through decades of professional struggles, celebrated each other's successes, and shared the unique burdens of caring for others while raising our own families. "Judith," Margaret's voice was warm with genuine affection. "How wonderful to hear from you. How are you managing?" The simple question, asked with real concern rather than clinical assessment, brought tears to my eyes. "Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do I seem different to you? Confused? Forgetful? Different how? You sound exactly like the sharp, intelligent woman I've known for 30 years. Why would you ask such a thing?" I told her everything. The overheard conversation, the financial manipulation, the planned competency hearing. Margaret listened without interruption, her silence growing more ominous as the story unfolded. "Those calculating little—" she began, then caught herself. "I'm sorry, Judith. I know they're your children, but what they're doing is elder abuse. It's a form of financial exploitation that's far more common than people realize. But surely they can't just have me declared incompetent without real evidence." "They can try," Margaret said grimly, "and unfortunately, they often succeed. All they need is one cooperative doctor and a few documented instances of supposed confusion or poor judgment. The system is supposed to protect elderly people, but sometimes it protects the wrong people." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the prayer I had whispered the night before. I had asked God for strength and wisdom. Perhaps this conversation with Margaret was part of his answer. Perhaps he was showing me that I wasn't paranoid or confused. I was being systematically betrayed by the people I loved most. But even as anger burned in my chest, I found myself praying for Thomas and Rebecca. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," I whispered, echoing Jesus' words from the cross. But even as I said it, I wondered if they did know exactly what they were doing. And if so, what did that say about the children I had raised? The grandfather clock chimed midnight, marking the beginning of another day in my uncertain future. Somewhere in this sleeping city, my children were probably resting peacefully in beds I had helped them afford, under roofs I had helped them secure, planning my legal destruction with the same methodical approach I had once used to plan their Christmas mornings. But I was no longer the naive mother who believed love was always returned in equal measure. The woman lying in this bed was a fighter who had spent 4 decades proving herself in operating rooms where lives hung in the balance. And if my own children thought they could manipulate and control me like some helpless old woman, they were about to discover just how wrong they were. Tomorrow, I would begin gathering my own evidence. Tomorrow, I would start fighting back. But tonight, I would pray for them one more time, because despite everything, they were still my children. And mothers, even when betrayed, never stop hoping their babies might still find their way back to love. The following Sunday arrived gray and cold, matching the heaviness in my chest as I prepared for church. I had barely slept, my mind replaying every conversation, every subtle dig, every moment when my children had made me feel small and confused. But I forced myself to get dressed, to put on my good navy dress and the pearl earrings William had given me for our 25th anniversary. If I was losing my mind, as they claimed, at least I would face God looking dignified. St. Matthew's Lutheran Church had been my spiritual home for 34 years. I knew every stained glass window, every worn spot on the wooden pews, every crack in the ceiling where the roof had leaked during the harsh winter of 2018. This was where William and I had been married, where we had baptized our children, where we had celebrated confirmations and mourned losses. These walls held the echoes of my prayers for my family's health, happiness, and salvation. But as I sat in my usual pew, 3rd row from the front, right side, I felt like a stranger. Around me, families chatted quietly before service began. Parents hushed toddlers. Teenagers texted on phones they thought were hidden. Grandparents smiled at babies being passed between relatives. Everyone seemed connected, rooted, part of something larger than themselves. I was alone. Pastor Williams delivered a sermon about the parable of the prodigal son, about forgiveness and redemption, and the father who waited patiently for his wayward child to return home. But all I could think about was how I felt more like the elder son, the one who had stayed faithful, worked hard, done everything right, only to watch others receive the celebration and attention I craved. The father's love never wavered, Pastor Williams said, his voice carrying across the congregation with practiced warmth. No matter how far his son strayed, no matter how much he had squandered, the father watched the road and waited for his return. I wanted to stand up and ask, but what about the faithful child? What about the one who never left, never rebelled, never caused heartache? What about the mother who gave everything and received only manipulation in return? Where was her celebration? Where was her feast? After service, I lingered in the fellowship hall, hoping someone might ask how I was doing, might notice that I seemed troubled. Margaret Hendricks, who had organized the church bake sales for 20 years, smiled and waved, but hurried past to help clean up. Jim and Carol Morrison, our former neighbors who had moved across town, made polite small talk about the weather before excusing themselves to check on their grandchildren in the nursery. Nobody asked about my family. Nobody wondered why I always sat alone now. Nobody seemed to notice that the woman who had once brought homemade casseroles to every potluck dinner and volunteered for every charity drive was slowly disappearing into herself. I drove home through streets lined with houses where Sunday dinners were being prepared, where families gathered around tables to share food and stories and laughter. Through kitchen windows, I glimpsed scenes of domestic happiness that felt as foreign to me now as life on another planet. Grandmothers helping children with puzzles, fathers carving roasts while mothers arranged flowers, multi-generational conversations flowing as naturally as breathing. My own kitchen waited in silence. No grandchildren's voices calling "Grandma," no daughters asking for my recipe for pot roast, no sons-in-law complimenting my cooking while secretly checking their phones for sports scores. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock, marking time that stretched endlessly ahead of me. I opened the refrigerator and stared at its contents. Leftover soup that would last me 3 more days. A half-gallon of milk I would never finish before it expired. Vegetables growing soft because I had lost the motivation to cook elaborate meals for one person. When had eating become such a chore? When had I stopped caring whether my food tasted good or just filled the empty space in my stomach? I heated the soup mechanically, ate it while standing at the counter, and washed my single bowl and spoon with movements that felt automatic and meaningless. This was my life now. This sterile routine, this careful management of resources and time and emotional energy to get through each day without falling apart completely. The phone rang at exactly 2:30 p.m. Thomas making his weekly obligation call. "Hi, Mom. How was church?" "Fine," I said, though nothing about it had been fine. "Pastor Williams gave a lovely sermon about forgiveness." "That's nice. Listen, I can't talk long. We're heading to Emily's parents' house for dinner. But I wanted to check in. How are you feeling today?" There it was again, that careful assessment disguised as concern. I could almost hear him taking mental notes. Does she sound confused? Depressed? Emotionally unstable? "I'm feeling like a woman whose children are trying to steal her life," I said before I could stop myself. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then Thomas's voice returned, measured and controlled. The tone he probably used with difficult clients. "Mom, that's exactly the kind of thinking that has us worried. We're not trying to steal anything. We're trying to help you. We love you." Love. The word felt like a weapon in his mouth. "If you love me, why are you discussing my mental state with my doctor behind my back? We're concerned about you. You've been forgetting things, repeating yourself, getting confused about dates. Rebecca found expired food in your refrigerator last time she visited. You left the stove on overnight 2 weeks ago. I did no such thing. See? This is what I mean. You don't remember. But Emily was here and saw it. The gas burner was still on when she went to the kitchen for water at midnight. Emily, his wife who barely spoke to me except to make pointed comments about my outdated decorating and inefficient housekeeping. Emily who had smiled sweetly while documenting evidence of my supposed decline. "I would never leave the stove on," I said, but even as I spoke, doubt crept into my voice. Had I? Was I losing my mind? Were they right to be concerned? "Mom, please don't get upset. We just want to make sure you're safe. Maybe it's time to consider some help around the house, someone to cook and clean and keep you company." Help? A nice way of saying surveillance. Someone to watch me, document my mistakes, report back to my children about my daily activities and mental state. "I don't need help," I said firmly. "I need my children to stop treating me like I'm already dead." "Mom!" Thomas's voice sharpened. "Nobody's treating you like you're dead, but you have to be realistic about aging. Dad's gone and you're alone in that big house. Things change. People's capabilities change. It's not shameful to admit you need assistance." After I hung up, I sat in my living room and stared at the family photos arranged on the mantelpiece. Thomas and Rebecca as babies, chubby and smiling. Their whole futures spread before them like blank pages waiting to be written. Their wedding photos, both looking so happy and hopeful on what should have been the best days of their lives. Pictures of grandchildren I barely knew, growing up without understanding that their grandmother was anything more than the elderly woman who sent birthday cards with money inside. I picked up the photo from Rebecca's wedding. She was radiant in her expensive dress, surrounded by bridesmaids who had probably forgotten my name by now. William stood beside her in his best suit, his face glowing with pride and joy. I remembered that day, remembered thinking that this was what all our sacrifices had been for, this moment of perfect happiness. Now I wondered if Rebecca had felt any gratitude at all, or if she had simply expected the fairy tale wedding the same way she expected everything else I provided. Had she ever thanked me for the months of double shifts? Had she ever acknowledged the retirement savings I had liquidated to pay for her perfect day? The house felt impossibly large around me. 4 bedrooms for one person. A dining room table that seated 8 but now accommodated only my solitary meals. A family room with furniture arranged for conversation that never happened. Every space was a reminder of the life I had expected to have in my golden years. A life filled with visits from children and grandchildren, holiday celebrations, the warm chaos of a family that actually wanted to spend time together. Instead, I had become a problem to be managed. An elderly woman whose independence threatened their financial plans. An inconvenient reminder of obligations they would rather not fulfill. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my sister Helen in Phoenix, the sister I had grown apart from when geography and busy lives created distance we never quite bridged. "Judith?" Helen's voice was surprised but pleased. "How wonderful to hear from you. How are you doing?" I started to give my usual answer. "Fine, everything's fine." But instead, I found myself crying, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from a place I had kept locked away for too long. "Oh, honey," Helen said softly. "What's wrong? Talk to me." I told her everything. The overheard conversation, the financial manipulation, the systematic isolation, the growing evidence that my children were building a case against my mental competency. Helen listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of shock or anger. "Those ungrateful little," she began, then caught herself. "I'm sorry, Judith. I know they're your babies, but what they're doing is unconscionable. You worked your whole life to give them everything, and this is how they repay you?" "Maybe they're right," I whispered. "Maybe I am losing my mind. Maybe I can't take care of myself anymore." "Nonsense," Helen said firmly. "You sound exactly like the sharp, intelligent woman you've always been. You're hurt and confused and betrayed, which is completely normal given what they're putting you through. That's not mental decline. That's emotional trauma." Her words were like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Someone believed me. Someone understood that I wasn't crazy or confused. I was being systematically destroyed by people who were supposed to love me. "Helen," I said, "I think they're going to try to have me declared incompetent. I think they want to take control of my finances and put me somewhere I can't interfere with their plans." "Over my dead body," Helen said fiercely. "Judith, listen to me. You need to protect yourself. Get a lawyer. Document everything. Fight back before it's too late. Fight back." The words echoed in my mind long after we hung up. For so long, I had been the peacekeeper, the giver, the one who smoothed over conflicts and made everyone else comfortable. I had never learned how to fight for myself because I had never imagined I would need to. But lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling where shadows moved like ghosts of the family I thought I had, I made a decision. If my children wanted a war, they would get one. If they thought they could manipulate and control me like some helpless old woman, they were about to discover that the woman who had fought for recognition in male-dominated operating rooms still had fight left in her. Tomorrow, I would begin gathering evidence of my own. Tomorrow, I would start building a case not for my incompetency, but for my liberation. But tonight, I prayed one more time for guidance, for strength, and for the wisdom to know the difference between forgiveness and foolishness. Because somewhere deep in my heart, despite everything, I still hoped that the children I had raised with love might somehow find their way back to the family we used to be. Even as I prepared for war, I couldn't quite give up on peace. Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was sitting at my kitchen table, reviewing the notes I had started keeping about every phone call and interaction with my children, when the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see Emily's silver BMW parked in my driveway, gleaming in the morning sun like a symbol of everything that had come between my family and genuine affection. Emily stood on my porch wearing one of her perfectly coordinated outfits. Beige cashmere sweater, designer jeans, leather boots that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months. Her smile was bright and artificial, the kind of expression she wore when she needed something but wanted to pretend the visit was purely social. "Hi, Judith," she said, breezing past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd check on you." Emily had never once dropped by just to check on me in the 10 years she'd been married to my son. She visited for specific occasions, holidays, birthdays, when they needed money, but never for the simple pleasure of spending time with her mother-in-law. This unexpected appearance felt like reconnaissance, another piece of their systematic documentation of my supposed decline. "How thoughtful," I said carefully, closing the door and following her into the living room. "Can I offer you some coffee?" "Oh, no thank you. I can't stay long. I just wanted to see how you're adjusting to everything." She settled onto my sofa with practiced ease, her eyes scanning the room as if taking inventory. Thomas is so worried about you living here all alone. We all are. There it was. The opening move in whatever game they were playing today. I took the armchair across from her, folding my hands in my lap to keep them from trembling with anger. I'm adjusting fine, I said. I've been living in this house for 26 years. I know where everything is, how everything works. I'm quite comfortable here. Emily tilted her head with exaggerated sympathy. Of course you are, honey. But comfort isn't really the issue, is it? It's about safety. About making sure you have help when you need it. Help. That word again. Wrapped in concern but meaning control. What kind of help do you think I need, Emily? Well, she glanced around the room again, and I noticed her gaze lingering on the small stain on the carpet where I had spilled tea last week. The slightly crooked picture frame I hadn't bothered to straighten. It's just that maintaining a house this size is a lot of work for anyone, especially someone who's… She paused delicately. Someone who's what? Someone who's at a different stage of life. There's no shame in admitting that things that used to be easy might be getting harder now. I felt my face flush with anger, but I kept my voice level. Emily, I practiced cardiac surgery until I was 63 years old. I think I can manage to keep my own house clean and my own affairs in order. Her smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in her eyes. Of course you can, but Thomas found expired milk in your refrigerator last time he visited. And there was that incident with the stove. What incident with the stove? Oh, you probably don't remember. It was a few weeks ago. Thomas and I stopped by to drop off your prescription refills, and you had left one of the burners on. The whole kitchen smelled like gas. We were so scared something terrible might have happened. I stared at her, my heart pounding. I never left the stove on. I would never do such a thing. Emily's expression became gentle, pitying. Honey, memory problems are nothing to be ashamed of. They happen to the best of us as we age, but they are something we need to take seriously. Memory problems. Another piece of evidence for their case. Another way to make me doubt my own mind, my own perceptions of reality. I don't have memory problems, I said firmly. I remember perfectly well that I didn't leave any stove on. If there was gas in the kitchen, someone else turned it on. The implication hung in the air between us. Emily's mask slipped slightly, revealing something calculating underneath the concern. Judith, that's exactly the kind of paranoid thinking that has everyone so worried. No one is trying to hurt you or trick you. We love you. We want to help you. Love. The word felt like a lie in her perfectly lipsticked mouth. If you love me, I said quietly, then why are you trying to convince me I'm losing my mind? Emily sighed, the sound carefully orchestrated to suggest infinite patience with a difficult elderly relative. No one is trying to convince you of anything. We're just trying to be realistic about what's best for everyone involved. Everyone involved. As if my well-being was somehow connected to their convenience, their financial plans, their vision of how my life should be managed for their benefit. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Emily making subtle suggestions about assisted living facilities, competency evaluations, and the wisdom of giving family members power of attorney before it becomes necessary. Each suggestion was wrapped in love and concern, but the underlying message was clear. Surrender your independence now, or we'll take it from you later. After she left, I sat in my kitchen and wrote down every word I could remember from our conversation. My hands were shaking with rage and fear, but I forced myself to be precise, to document the time, date, and exact phrases she had used. If they were building a case against me, I would build one of my own. That evening, Thomas called with news that made my blood run cold. Mom, I've set up an appointment for you with Dr. Lewis on Thursday. Just a routine checkup, but he wants to do some cognitive assessments too. You know, memory tests, that sort of thing. Cognitive assessments. Memory tests. The machinery of their plan was now in motion. I don't need cognitive assessments, I said. My mind is perfectly fine. I'm sure it is, Thomas said in the patronizing tone he might use with a child. But humor us, okay? It would make everyone feel better to have professional confirmation that you're doing well. Professional confirmation. From the same doctor who had apparently already agreed to write the assessment they needed for their competency hearing. And if I refuse? There was a pause. A telling silence that revealed more than any words could have. Why would you refuse, Mom? Unless you have something to hide? The manipulation was so blatant it took my breath away. Refuse the evaluation, and I was clearly hiding something. Submit to it, and give them the ammunition they needed to destroy my independence. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up before he could respond. Friday afternoon brought the final blow. Rebecca appeared at my door unannounced, carrying a manila folder thick with documents and wearing an expression of grim determination. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the house with none of Emily's pretense of social courtesy. "Thomas and I have been discussing your situation, and we've made some decisions. Decisions. About my life, made without me." She spread the documents across my dining room table like a general planning a military campaign. Powers of attorney, guardianship petitions, financial management agreements. Page after page of legal forms designed to strip away every vestige of my autonomy. "We've found a lovely assisted living facility," Rebecca said, pointing to a glossy brochure featuring smiling elderly people engaged in supervised activities. "Golden Years Manor. It's only 20 minutes from our house, so we can visit regularly. They have a wonderful program, very social, lots of activities to keep you busy. Keep me busy, like a child who needed to be entertained and supervised." "I'm not going to an assisted living facility," I said quietly. Rebecca's smile became strained. "Mom, it's not really your choice anymore. Dr. Lewis has already agreed to sign the competency evaluation. We have documented evidence of your declining mental state, the expired food, the stove incident, your increasingly paranoid behavior. Paranoid behavior? Like accusing Emily of turning on your stove, like claiming we're trying to steal your money, like refusing reasonable help and medical evaluations." She tapped the papers with one manicured finger. "All of this is going to look very convincing to a judge." I stared at my daughter. This woman I had carried in my body, nursed at my breast, rocked to sleep through countless nights when she was sick or frightened. The baby who had once reached for me with such trust and love was now threatening to destroy my life with the casual efficiency of a corporate executive eliminating redundant personnel. "Rebecca," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I am your mother. I gave birth to you. I raised you. I loved you. How can you do this to me?" For just a moment, something flickered across her face. A flash of the child she had once been, uncertain and vulnerable. But it disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. "We're doing this because we love you," she said. But her voice lacked conviction. "Because we want what's best for you. What's best for me, or what's best for your inheritance." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Rebecca's face hardened, and I saw in her expression something I had never seen before. Not love, not even affection, but cold calculation. "Sign the papers, Mom," she said quietly. "Make this easy for everyone. You'll be comfortable at Golden Years. You'll have people to take care of you, and we'll make sure your finances are properly managed. Properly managed. By them. For their benefit." I looked at the papers spread across the table where we had once shared holiday meals, where I had helped them with homework, where we had celebrated their achievements and comforted them through disappointments. Now this same table held the instruments of my destruction, prepared by the children I had sacrificed everything to nurture. "No," I said simply. Rebecca's jaw tightened. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. You're not capable of making these kinds of decisions anymore. We're trying to be patient, trying to do this the easy way, but if you force us to go to court, then we'll go to court," I said, standing up with all the dignity I could muster. "And we'll see who the judge believes. Two greedy children trying to steal their mother's life savings, or a woman who practiced medicine for 45 years and has never been found mentally incompetent by any legitimate medical evaluation." Rebecca gathered up her papers with sharp, angry movements. "You're making a huge mistake, Mom. We're your family. We're the only ones who care about you. Don't make us into your enemies." "You already are," I said quietly. "You made that choice when you decided my money was more important than my dignity." After she left, I sat alone in my dining room and finally understood with crystalline clarity what I was facing. This wasn't about concern for my welfare or genuine worry about my mental state. This was about greed, pure and simple. They wanted my house, my savings, my investments, everything William and I had worked our entire lives to build. And they were willing to destroy my reputation, my independence, and my peace of mind to get it. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated the woman who had fought her way through medical school when professors told her she should become a nurse instead. They had forgotten about the surgeon who had saved lives while male colleagues questioned her competence. They had miscalculated the strength of someone who had spent 4 decades proving that she was capable of anything she set her mind to. If they wanted a war, they would get one. But this time, I would be ready. That night, I did something I hadn't done since William's death. I got down on my knees beside my bed and prayed with the fierce intensity of a woman who had finally found her purpose. "Lord," I whispered, "give me the strength to fight for what's right. Give me the wisdom to see clearly through their deceptions. And if it be your will, help me protect not just myself, but any other elderly person who might face this same betrayal. Let justice prevail, even if mercy has failed." When I rose from my knees, I felt different, stronger, ready for battle. They thought they were dealing with a confused old woman. They were about to meet a warrior. Monday morning, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I put on my best business suit, the navy blue one I had worn to board meetings and medical conferences, applied my makeup with the precision of a woman preparing for surgery, and drove to the offices of Peterson, Martinez & Associates, the law firm William had always spoken of with respect. The receptionist, a young woman who couldn't have been older than my granddaughter, looked up with surprise when I announced I needed to see an attorney immediately about estate planning and elder abuse prevention. "Do you have an appointment, Mrs. Walker?" Dr. Judith Walker. And no, I don't have an appointment, but I have a credit card and a checkbook, and I need legal representation today. Something in my tone must have conveyed the urgency of my situation, because within 20 minutes, I was sitting across from Sarah Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who listened to my story with the focused attention of someone accustomed to handling family crises that had spiraled beyond repair. "Dr. Walker," she said when I finished explaining the situation, "what you're describing is a textbook case of financial elder abuse and psychological manipulation. Your children are following a very specific playbook. Isolate the target, create doubt about their mental capacity, manufacture evidence of incompetence, then move in for legal control." Relief flooded through me like medicine entering my bloodstream. Someone believed me. Someone understood that I wasn't paranoid or confused. I was being systematically victimized. Can they really have me declared incompetent based on expired milk and a gas stove I never turned on? Sarah's expression darkened. Unfortunately, they can try. The burden of proof for competency hearings is surprisingly low, especially when family members present a united front and have a cooperative medical professional. But there are things we can do to protect you. She pulled out a legal pad and began making notes with swift, decisive strokes. First, we're going to get you an independent psychiatric evaluation from a geriatrician who specializes in competency assessments, someone with no connection to your family or their doctor. Second, we're going to review all your financial records and create a clear paper trail showing competent financial management. Third, we're going to document every interaction you have with your children from this point forward. Is that enough? It's a start. But Dr. Walker, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before answering. Are you prepared to cut off contact with your children if necessary? Are you willing to disinherit them if they continue with this course of action? The question hit me like a physical blow. Cut off contact with Thomas and Rebecca? Disinherit the children I had poured my life into raising? The very thought made my chest tighten with grief. I don't know. They're still my children. Despite everything, I love them. Sarah's expression softened with understanding. Of course you do. That's what makes this so devastating. But Dr. Walker, love without boundaries becomes enabling. And if you're not prepared to set consequences for their behavior, they'll continue escalating their attacks until they achieve their goal. I left the law office with a folder full of documents and a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Sarah had given me homework: gather every piece of financial documentation from the past 5 years, compile a list of witnesses who could testify to my mental acuity, and most importantly, Stop giving my children any money or financial assistance whatsoever. Money is power, she had explained. As long as you continue funding their lifestyles, you're enabling their sense of entitlement to your resources. Cut off the flow and watch how quickly their true motivations become clear. That afternoon, I did something that felt both liberating and terrifying. I called my bank and removed Thomas and Rebecca from every account where they had been listed as secondary signers. I changed all my passwords, updated my emergency contacts, and requested that any inquiries about my accounts be referred directly to me, regardless of who was asking. Then I called Thomas. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of patient condescension. "I was just about to call you. Dr. Lewis wants to move your appointment up to tomorrow afternoon. He had a cancellation and thought it would be good to get your evaluation done sooner rather than later." "Thomas," I said calmly, "I'm not going to Dr. Lewis for any evaluation." Silence. Then, "Mom, we discussed this. You agreed to humor us." "No, you discussed it. I said I would think about it. And I have. I've decided that if I need a psychiatric evaluation, I'll get one from a doctor of my own choosing, not someone who's already decided what the results should be." His voice sharpened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I know you've been talking to Dr. Lewis about my supposed mental decline. It means I know you've been building a case against my competency. And it means I'm not going to participate in my own destruction." Another pause. When Thomas spoke again, his tone had changed completely. Gone was the patronizing concern, replaced by something colder and more calculating. "Mom, you're being unreasonable. We're trying to help you, but if you insist on being difficult, we'll have to explore other options." "What other options?" "Legal options. For your own protection, of course." The threat was clear, but somehow it no longer frightened me the way it had a week ago. "Thomas, if you want to take me to court, go ahead. But you should know that I've hired my own attorney. I've had my own psychiatric evaluation scheduled with an independent doctor, and I've documented every conversation we've had over the past month." The silence stretched so long I wondered if he had hung up. Finally, he spoke, and his voice carried a note of uncertainty I hadn't heard before. "You hired a lawyer?" "I did. Sarah Martinez of Peterson. Martinez and Associates. Perhaps you've heard of them. They specialize in elder abuse cases." "Elder abuse?" His voice rose with what sounded like genuine shock. "Mom, we're not abusing you. We're trying to help you." "By threatening to have me declared incompetent? By trying to force me into an assisted living facility? By taking control of my finances? Thomas, if that's your idea of help, I'd hate to see what you consider harm." I hung up before he could respond, my hands trembling slightly but my heart steady with resolve. Within an hour, my phone was ringing almost constantly. Thomas called 3 times. Rebecca called twice. Even Emily called to express her concern about my irrational behavior. I didn't answer any of their calls. Tuesday brought my appointment with Dr. Patricia Chen, the geriatric psychiatrist Sarah had recommended. Dr. Chen was a small, precise woman who spoke with the calm authority of someone accustomed to dealing with family crises and legal challenges. She spent 3 hours with me, conducting tests that were far more comprehensive than anything Dr. Lewis would have provided. "Dr. Walker," she said as we concluded our session, "I want to be very clear about my findings. You show no signs of cognitive impairment, memory loss, or diminished mental capacity. Your responses to all assessments fall well within normal ranges for someone of your age and education level. In fact, your cognitive functioning is quite impressive. What about the things my children claim I've forgotten? The expired food, the stove incident?" Dr. Chen made a note in her file. "Those isolated incidents, even if true, wouldn't constitute evidence of incompetence. Everyone occasionally forgets to check expiration dates or makes minor household mistakes. What's concerning is the pattern of your family members using these normal occurrences to question your overall mental capacity." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Dr. Walker, based on what you've told me about your family's behavior, I believe you're experiencing emotional abuse designed to make you doubt your own perceptions and capabilities. This is a common tactic used by family members who want to gain control over elderly relatives' financial resources." Her words were like a benediction. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't incompetent. I was being psychologically manipulated by people who were supposed to love and protect me. Wednesday evening, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. I called the non-emergency police line and asked to speak with someone about documenting potential elder abuse. Officer Maria Santos arrived an hour later, a kind-faced woman who listened patiently as I explained the situation and showed her the evidence I had been collecting. "Ma'am," she said, reviewing my notes and Sarah's preliminary legal filings, "what you're describing is definitely concerning. We see this more often than you might think. Adult children trying to gain control of elderly parents' assets through legal manipulation." She helped me file a formal report documenting my children's threats and attempts at financial coercion. "This creates an official record," she explained. "If they do try to pursue guardianship proceedings, the court will see that you were proactive about protecting yourself and that you had legitimate concerns about their motives." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. The constant knot of anxiety in my stomach had loosened. The fog of self-doubt that had been clouding my thoughts had lifted. I was no longer a victim waiting for disaster to strike. I was a woman taking control of her own life and destiny. Thursday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Rebecca stood on my doorstep, but she looked different, smaller somehow, less certain. Gone was the aggressive confidence she had displayed when spreading legal documents across my dining room table. "Mom," she said quietly, "can we talk? Please?" I let her in, but this time I remained standing, maintaining the physical and emotional distance that had become necessary for my self-protection. "Thomas told me about the lawyer," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "and the police report. Mom, we never meant for things to go this far. Didn't you?" I asked calmly. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you planned every step very carefully." Rebecca's composure cracked slightly. "We were worried about you. Really worried. After Dad died, you seemed so lost, so alone. We thought maybe you needed more help than you were willing to admit. And taking control of my finances was your idea of help?" She couldn't meet my eyes. We thought it would be easier if we could manage things for you. Take the burden off your shoulders. The burden of my own independence? Mom, please. You're our mother. We love you. Can't we work this out somehow?" For a moment, I felt the familiar tug of maternal instinct, the desire to forgive and forget and return to the way things used to be. But then I remembered Sarah's words about love without boundaries, and I steeled myself against the manipulation I now recognized so clearly. "Rebecca," I said gently, "if you love me, then you'll respect my right to live my own life on my own terms. You'll stop trying to convince me I'm incompetent. You'll stop plotting to take control of my affairs. And you'll start treating me like the intelligent, capable woman who raised you instead of like a problem to be solved." She left without another word, and I watched through my window as she sat in her car for several minutes, her head resting on the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to run outside, to comfort her, to make everything okay the way I had when she was a child. But I had learned the difference between love and enabling, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in your own destruction. That evening, I made one final call. I dialed the number for New Hope Community Church, the church Helen had told me about, where they ran support groups for people facing family crises. "Hello," I said when someone answered. "My name is Judith Walker, and I think I need to talk to someone about finding my way back to faith when the people who were supposed to love you have tried to destroy you." The voice on the other end was warm and understanding. "Dr. Walker, we've been expecting your call. Sometimes God uses our deepest betrayals to lead us to our greatest redemption. Can you come in tomorrow evening?" As I hung up the phone, I realized that for the first time in months, I was looking forward to tomorrow. Not because my problems were solved, but because I was finally fighting back. Not because my children had changed, but because I had found my strength again. The woman who had once fought for respect in male-dominated operating rooms was ready to fight for her freedom in courtrooms if necessary. And this time, she wouldn't be fighting alone. Friday morning arrived with an unusual stillness, as if the world itself was holding its breath for what was about to unfold. I had spent the night in prayer, not the desperate pleading I had been offering for weeks, but a calm, centered conversation with God that felt different, more like communion than supplication. I woke with a peace I hadn't experienced since William's death, and with it came an unexpected clarity about what I needed to do next. The phone rang at exactly 8:47 a.m. I noted the time carefully, as Sarah had instructed me to document everything. It was Thomas, and his voice carried a tone I had never heard before, not manipulation or condescension, but something that sounded almost like panic. "Mom, we need to talk. All of us. Together. Today." "About what, Thomas?" "About everything. About the misunderstandings that have gotten out of hand. About finding a way forward that works for everyone." Misunderstandings. As if their systematic attempt to steal my independence was simply a communication problem that could be resolved with better dialogue. "Thomas, I think we've said everything that needs to be said. You want control of my life and my finances. I want to maintain my independence and dignity. There's no middle ground here. Please, Mom, just give us one chance to make this right. Come to Rebecca's house tonight for dinner. Let us explain ourselves properly. If you still feel the same way afterward, we'll respect your decision." There was something in his voice, a note of desperation that made me pause. Part of me wondered if they had finally realized how far they had pushed things, if some vestige of love or conscience was finally asserting itself. But a larger part of me recognized this as potentially another manipulation, another attempt to get me into a controlled environment where they could work on my emotions and wear down my resolve. "I'll consider it," I said finally. "But if I come, I'm bringing my attorney." "Your attorney." "Mom, this is supposed to be a family dinner, not a legal proceeding." "Thomas, when your children threaten to have you declared mentally incompetent and steal your life savings, family dinners become legal proceedings." I hung up and immediately called Sarah, who listened to the conversation summary with obvious concern. "Dr. Walker, I don't like this. It feels like they're planning something. Either one final attempt at emotional manipulation, or they're going to serve you with legal papers in front of the whole family. Should I not go? That's your decision. But if you do go, I'm coming with you. And we're going to record everything, with or without their consent. Minnesota is a one-party consent state, so as long as you agree to the recording, it's perfectly legal." That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to William's grave at Woodland Cemetery, parking under the oak tree where we used to bring the children for picnics when they were small. The headstone was simple gray granite, engraved with his name, dates, and the words, "Beloved husband and father." I sat on the small bench we had installed nearby and spoke to him as if he were sitting beside me. "William, I don't know what you would think about what our children have become. Part of me hopes you can't see this from wherever you are, because it would break your heart the way it's breaking mine. But I need your guidance. I need to know if I'm doing the right thing by fighting them, or if I should just give them what they want and hope they'll treat me with some kindness afterward." The wind stirred the leaves above me, and for just a moment, I could almost hear his voice. Practical, measured, always focused on justice rather than sentiment. "The truth matters, Judith. It always matters. Even when it's painful. Don't let anyone convince you to abandon the truth for the sake of peace." I sat there for an hour, remembering the man who had loved me for 38 years, who had supported my career when other men might have felt threatened, who had believed in my strength even when I doubted it myself. When I finally stood to leave, I felt his presence like a blessing, a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I sometimes felt. At 5 o'clock, Sarah picked me up in her sedan, equipped with a digital recorder and a briefcase full of legal documents. "Remember," she said as we drove to Rebecca's house, "you don't have to sign anything, agree to anything, or commit to anything tonight. This is just information gathering." Rebecca's house was a showplace, a sprawling colonial in one of Minneapolis's most exclusive neighborhoods, paid for in part by the money I had given them over the years. Cars lined the driveway, Thomas's BMW, Emily's Mercedes, and another vehicle I didn't recognize. Through the front windows, I could see people moving around, and I realized with growing unease that this wasn't going to be the intimate family dinner Thomas had described. Rebecca answered the door wearing a black dress that made her look like she was attending a funeral, perhaps mine. Her smile was strained, and her eyes kept darting to Sarah with obvious discomfort. "Mom, I wasn't expecting you to bring anyone else. Rebecca, this is Sarah Martinez, my attorney." "Sarah, my daughter, Rebecca. The introduction fell into the room like a stone into still water, creating ripples of tension that reached every corner. In the living room, I could see Thomas and Emily, along with two other people I didn't recognize. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit and a woman with a laptop who had the efficient look of a court reporter. "Who are these people?" I asked, my heart beginning to race. Rebecca's composure cracked slightly. "Mom, please don't be upset. We thought it would be helpful to have some professional guidance tonight. Mr. Davidson is an elder care specialist, and Ms. Johnson is here to document our conversation for everyone's protection." An elder care specialist, a court reporter. They had planned this as an ambush, a formal proceeding disguised as a family dinner. Sarah squeezed my arm gently, a reminder that I wasn't facing this alone. "Dr. Walker," Sarah said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I need to inform everyone present that this conversation is being recorded for your protection. Please proceed." The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. Whatever they had planned clearly hadn't included the presence of my attorney or the knowledge that their words would be preserved for potential legal proceedings. Thomas cleared his throat and attempted to regain control of the situation. "Mom, we asked you here tonight because we love you and we're concerned about your recent behavior. Making accusations against your own family, hiring lawyers, filing police reports. This isn't like you." "You're right," I said calmly. "The old Judith would have let you walk all over her. The old Judith would have signed whatever papers you put in front of her and thanked you for taking such good care of her affairs. But that woman is gone." Emily leaned forward, her voice taking on the artificial sweetness I had come to recognize as a warning sign. "Judith, we understand you're feeling defensive, but can't you see that we're trying to help? You're getting older, living alone in that big house, managing complex financial affairs." "Complex financial affairs?" I interrupted. "I managed a medical practice for 45 years. I think I can handle my own checking account." The elder care specialist, Mr. Davidson, spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to dealing with difficult elderly clients. "Dr. Walker, sometimes the people closest to us can see changes that we ourselves don't notice. Your family is concerned about some incidents that suggest you might benefit from additional support." "What incidents?" Sarah asked sharply. "We'd like specifics, with dates and witnesses." The room fell uncomfortably quiet. Rebecca glanced at Thomas, who looked at Emily, who stared at her hands. Finally, Thomas spoke, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "There was the expired food in the refrigerator." "Food expires," Sarah said dryly. "That's what expiration dates are for." "Next?" "The stove incident," Emily said quickly. "She left a burner on all night." "According to whom?" Sarah asked. "Were there any witnesses besides family members who have a financial interest in proving incompetence?" The questions were devastating in their precision, exposing the weakness of their evidence and the obvious bias of their witnesses. I watched my children's faces as their case crumbled under professional scrutiny, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, but sadness. How had we come to this? How had love been replaced by such calculating cruelty? Mr. Davidson cleared his throat and pulled out a folder. "Perhaps we should focus on solutions rather than problems. I've prepared some documents that would allow Mrs. Walker to maintain her independence while providing her family with the ability to help when necessary." He spread the papers across Rebecca's coffee table, the same coffee table I had given her as a housewarming gift 5 years ago. Powers of attorney, financial management agreements, healthcare directives, all of it designed to give my children legal control over every aspect of my life. "These are very reasonable arrangements," Mr. Davidson continued. "They would allow you to continue living in your home while ensuring that your family can step in if you ever need assistance." Sarah picked up the documents and scanned them quickly, her expression growing increasingly grim. "Dr. Walker, these papers would give your children complete control over your finances immediately, not just in case of future incapacity. They could access your accounts, sell your house, make investment decisions, all without your consent or knowledge." "But only if it's necessary," Rebecca protested. "Only if Mom needs help." "Who determines what's necessary?" Sarah asked. "According to these documents, your children would have that authority. They could decide you need help and act accordingly, regardless of your own wishes. I looked around the room at these people who claimed to love me, my son, my daughter-in-law, and the strangers they had hired to help them steal my life. The court reporter's fingers moved silently across her keyboard, documenting every word for posterity. Mr. Davidson shuffled his papers with growing impatience. Emily checked her phone as if this were just another tedious business meeting. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. I felt William's presence as clearly as if he were sitting beside me, and with it came a memory I had completely forgotten. 6 months before his death, we had attended the funeral of his law partner's mother. Eleanor Matthews had been a vibrant, intelligent woman until her children convinced a judge she was incompetent and placed her in a nursing home where she died within a year, isolated from her friends and stripped of her dignity. At the funeral, William had taken my hand and said quietly, "Promise me, Judith, if anything ever happens to me, don't let anyone do to you what they did to Eleanor. Fight for yourself, because you're the only one who can." I had promised, and then I had forgotten, but God had brought the memory back at exactly the moment I needed it most. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of 45 years of professional authority settling around my shoulders like a mantle. When I spoke, my voice carried the same calm command I had used in operating rooms when lives hung in the balance. "Thomas, Rebecca, look at me." They lifted their heads reluctantly, and I saw something in their faces I hadn't noticed before. Shame. Deep, corrosive shame that they were trying to hide behind legal documents and professional facilitators. "I am your mother," I said quietly. "I gave birth to you. I raised you. I sacrificed for you. I loved you with everything I had, and you repay me by trying to steal my independence, my dignity, and my financial security." "Mom," Thomas began, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. You want to know what's wrong with my mental state? I'll tell you. I was stupid enough to believe that love was returned in equal measure. I was naive enough to think that raising good children meant they would treat me with goodness in return. I was foolish enough to trust you with my vulnerability instead of protecting myself from your greed." The silence in the room was absolute. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. But I'm not stupid anymore. I'm not naive anymore. And I'm certainly not foolish anymore. So here's what's going to happen. I turned to Sarah. "Please tell them about the changes I've made to my will." Sarah opened her briefcase with deliberate precision. "Dr. Walker has executed a new will that removes both of you as beneficiaries. Her estate will now be donated to medical scholarships for underprivileged women and to organizations that support elderly people who have been abandoned by their families." Rebecca gasped as if she had been physically struck. "Mom, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. You wanted my money? You've lost it. Forever. Because I've learned the difference between love and manipulation, and what you've shown me isn't love." Thomas was on his feet now, his face red with anger. "This is insane. We're your children. You deserve exactly what you've earned," I said calmly. "Which is nothing." I walked toward the door, pausing only to deliver one final message. "I forgive you," I said, and I meant it. I forgive you because that's what Christians do. But forgiveness doesn't mean I have to enable your cruelty or participate in my own destruction. It means I'm setting you free to find your own way in the world, the same way I'm setting myself free from your manipulation. Sarah and I left that house and drove back to my home in complete silence. It wasn't until we were sitting in my kitchen that she finally spoke. "Dr. Walker, how do you feel?" I considered the question carefully. How did I feel? Sad, certainly. Angry, yes. But underneath those emotions was something else. Something I hadn't felt in months. "Free," I said finally. "For the first time in years, I feel completely free." That night, I knelt beside my bed and prayed with gratitude instead of desperation. God had given me the strength to stand up for myself, the wisdom to see through their deceptions, and the courage to choose my own dignity over their approval. I was finally free to discover who Judith Walker was meant to be when she belonged only to herself and to God. The following Monday morning, I woke before sunrise for the first time in months without the crushing weight of dread pressing down on my chest. Instead of lying in bed rehearsing conversations with my children or worrying about what new manipulation they might attempt. I found myself eager to begin the day. The house felt different somehow. Not empty, but peaceful. Not lonely, but serene. I made my coffee in the blue ceramic mug, opened my Bible to Psalm 46, and read aloud into the morning stillness. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. For the first time in years, those words felt like a promise rather than a desperate plea. At 9 a.m. sharp, I dialed the number for New Hope Community Church and asked to speak with Pastor Michael Chen, the man who ran the support group Helen had mentioned. His voice was warm and welcoming, with none of the professional distance I had grown accustomed to from people who viewed elderly concerns as burdens to be managed, rather than hearts to be healed. Dr. Walker, I'm so glad you called. I've been in ministry for 22 years, and I've seen too many faithful people struggle with family betrayal in their later years. You're not alone in this journey, and you're certainly not alone in wondering how to reconcile Christian forgiveness with practical self-protection. His words were like balm on a wound I hadn't realized was still bleeding. Pastor Chen, I've forgiven my children, but I don't trust them anymore. I love them, but I can't have them in my life. Is that wrong? Am I failing as a Christian mother? Dr. Walker, forgiveness doesn't mean returning to patterns that enabled abuse. Jesus forgave those who crucified him, but he didn't climb back on the cross. Boundaries aren't unforgiving. They're wisdom. That evening, I attended my first support group meeting in the church's small fellowship hall. 7 other women sat in a circle of folding chairs, ranging in age from 62 to 84, each carrying stories of family betrayal that echoed my own with heartbreaking similarity. There was Margaret, whose son had forged her signature on documents transferring her house to his name. Dorothy, whose daughter had convinced doctors she was suicidal and had her involuntarily committed for 3 months. Linda, whose grandchildren had been turned against her by lies about her being dangerous and unstable. As each woman shared her story, I realized that what I had experienced wasn't unique or even uncommon. Elder abuse by adult children was an epidemic hidden behind closed doors, enabled by a society that assumed family members always had their elderly relatives' best interests at heart. The hardest part, said Ruth, a former teacher whose twin sons had emptied her retirement accounts, isn't the money. It's the realization that the babies you raised, the children you sacrificed for, were capable of this level of cruelty. I nodded, feeling tears slip down my cheeks. I keep wondering what I did wrong, how I failed them as a mother. Pastor Chen leaned forward with gentle authority. Dr. Walker, you're looking for logical explanations for illogical behavior. Some people become adults without developing adult character. Some people never learn to see their parents as human beings worthy of respect, rather than resources to be exploited. That's not a reflection of your parenting. It's a reflection of choices they made as adults. After the meeting, 3 of the women invited me for coffee at a nearby diner. As we sat in a red vinyl booth, sharing stories and laughter, I realized how long it had been since I had felt genuine companionship with people who understood my situation without judgment or agenda. You know what the blessing is in all this? Asked Dorothy, stirring sugar into her coffee with hands that bore the liver spots of 8 decades. We get to discover who we really are when we're not defined by what we can provide for other people. Over the following weeks, I began to understand what she meant. Without the constant drain of managing my children's financial crises and emotional manipulation, I had energy for activities I had abandoned years ago. I started reading novels again, not medical journals or family finance articles, but stories that transported me to other worlds and reminded me that life contained beauty and adventure, even for women in their late 60s. I joined the church choir, something I hadn't done since my medical practice became too demanding for evening commitments. Standing in the sanctuary on Sunday mornings, singing hymns of praise with 20 other voices, I felt connected to something larger than my personal pain. The music carried me beyond the narrow confines of family disappointment into a space where my worth wasn't measured by what I could provide for others. Most surprisingly, I began volunteering at the free clinic downtown, using my medical skills to serve patients who couldn't afford traditional health care. The work was demanding, treating everything from diabetes management to wound care in a facility with limited resources. But it reminded me why I had chosen medicine in the first place, not for prestige or financial security, but to heal suffering and restore hope. Dr. Walker, said Maria Santos, a young mother whose diabetes I was helping to manage, you saved my life. I couldn't afford to see a regular doctor, and my blood sugar was out of control. Why do you do this? Why do you come here? I thought about her question as I updated her chart. Why did I volunteer my time and expertise for patients who couldn't pay me, while my own children saw me only as a source of financial support? Because, I said finally, this is what love looks like when it's not asking for anything in return. 6 weeks after the confrontation at Rebecca's house, I received an unexpected phone call. It was my grandson Jake, Thomas's 19-year-old son, calling from his college dorm room. Grandma Judith? His voice was uncertain, almost timid. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. Dad said I shouldn't, but I needed to talk to you. My heart leaped with hope and fear in equal measure. Of course it's okay, sweetheart. I'm always happy to hear from you. Grandma, I don't really understand what happened between you and Dad and Aunt Rebecca, but I know you're not talking anymore. And I know Dad says you're not thinking clearly, but that doesn't sound like the grandmother I remember. I sat down heavily, gripping the phone with hands that suddenly trembled. What do you remember about me, Jake? I remember you helping me with my science projects when I was little. I remember you explaining how the heart works, and why vaccines are important, and how to think through problems logically. I remember you being really smart. So when Dad says you're not capable of managing your own life anymore, it doesn't make sense. Tears streamed down my face as I listened to this young man, this boy I had rocked as a baby, defending my intelligence and competence when his own father had tried to destroy both. Jake, there are some complicated family issues that I hope you'll understand when you're older, but I want you to know that I love you, and I'm proud of the man you're becoming. And nothing that's happened changes that. Grandma, can I ask you something? Dad won't tell me, but did you really change your will? Did you really give away all your money? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I couldn't fully explain to a 19-year-old whose understanding of family loyalty hadn't yet been complicated by adult betrayal. Jake, I made some changes to ensure that my legacy goes to people who will use it to help others, rather than people who saw it as something they were entitled to. Does that make sense? There was a long pause. Then, in a voice that sounded older than his 19 years, Yeah, Grandma, I think it does. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen and cried. Not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. Here was proof that my influence on the next generation hadn't been entirely wasted. Here was evidence that at least one young person could recognize manipulation and think independently about family dynamics. That evening, I called Sarah Martinez to discuss establishing a scholarship fund at the University of Minnesota Medical School, specifically for students from disadvantaged backgrounds who wanted to specialize in geriatric medicine. We worked out the details over several meetings, creating an endowment that would continue helping young doctors long after I was gone. Dr. Walker, Sarah said as we finalized the paperwork, I have to ask, do you ever regret cutting your children out of your will? Do you ever wonder if you should give them another chance? I considered her question carefully. Did I regret it? Did I lie awake at night wondering if I had been too harsh, too unforgiving, too quick to judge? Sarah, I spent 40 years giving them chances. I funded their educations, their houses, their children's expenses, their emergencies, their dreams. I gave them love, support, guidance, and endless forgiveness for their selfishness and ingratitude. What I never gave them was consequences for their behavior. I paused, looking out my office window at the garden where spring flowers were beginning to bloom. Now they have consequences. And maybe, just maybe, those consequences will teach them something about the value of relationships that can't be bought or manipulated or taken for granted. 3 months after that final confrontation, I received a card in the mail with no return address. Inside was a photograph of my granddaughter Emma, Rebecca's youngest, wearing her high school graduation cap and gown. On the back, someone had written in careful cursive, "She asked about you. I placed the photo on my mantelpiece next to the pictures of my support group friends and my volunteer clinic colleagues. Emma looked so much like Rebecca had at that age, bright-eyed, hopeful, full of potential. I said a prayer for her, asking God to guide her toward choices that would bring her happiness and help her become a woman who understood the difference between love and manipulation. That night, as I prepared for bed in my peaceful house, I reflected on how much my life had changed. I was no longer the anxious, self-doubting woman who had discovered her children's betrayal. I was no longer the victim of other people's greed and manipulation. I was Judith Walker, doctor, volunteer, choir member, friend, mentor. I was a woman who had learned to love herself enough to protect herself. I was a child of God who had discovered that sometimes the greatest act of faith is refusing to enable other people's sin. As I knelt beside my bed for my evening prayers, I felt William's presence like a blessing, and God's love like a fortress around my heart. "Thank you," I whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to choose dignity over desperation, self-respect over people-pleasing, and healthy boundaries over toxic relationships." Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to serve, to heal, to grow, and to discover more about the woman I was becoming in this unexpected chapter of my life. Tomorrow would be another day of freedom, another day of grace, another day of living authentically instead of living in fear. For the first time in years, I looked forward to whatever tomorrow might bring. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of my home preparing Sunday dinner for 8 people. Not my biological family, but the family God had given me through shared struggle and genuine love. Margaret from the support group was bringing her famous apple pie. Dorothy was contributing her mother's green bean casserole recipe. Linda was bringing her granddaughter Amy, a pre-med student who had been asking me questions about medical school and women in medicine. The dining room table that had once felt too large for one person now seemed perfectly sized for the laughter and conversation that filled it every week. We had created our own tradition, Sunday dinners for those whose families had abandoned them, proof that blood doesn't always make family, and family doesn't always share blood. As I set the table with the good china I had saved for special occasions that never came, I marveled at how much joy I had discovered in this simple ritual. These women understood loss and betrayal, but they also understood resilience and hope. They appreciated the effort that went into preparing a meal, the thought behind choosing flowers for the centerpiece, the love expressed through creating beauty and comfort for others. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Pastor Chen holding a wrapped package and wearing a smile that suggested good news. "Dr. Walker, I have something for you," he said, stepping into the foyer. "The scholarship committee at the University of Minnesota wanted me to give you this personally." Inside the package was a framed photograph of 5 young women in white coats, standing in front of the medical school with expressions of determined hope that reminded me of myself 50 years ago. The inscription read, "The first recipients of the Dr. Judith Walker Scholarship for Women in Geriatric Medicine. Thank you for believing in our dreams." I stared at the photo through tears that blurred my vision but not my understanding. These young women would spend their careers caring for elderly patients, treating people like me with dignity and respect, advocating for those who couldn't advocate for themselves. This was my legacy. Not the money I might have left to ungrateful children, but the healing these doctors would provide for decades to come. "There's more," Pastor Chen said gently. "The medical school wants to establish an annual lecture series in your name. The Dr. Judith Walker Lectures on Ethics in Elder Care. They want you to give the inaugural presentation next month." As my dinner guests arrived and we gathered around the table, I shared the news about the scholarship recipients and the lecture series. The response was immediate and joyful. Applause, tears, embraces from women who understood what it meant to have your life's work honored rather than exploited. "Judith," said Ruth, raising her glass of sparkling cider, "this is what happens when you plant seeds in good soil instead of throwing them on rocky ground. These young doctors will touch thousands of lives because you chose to invest in healing rather than enabling." After dinner, as we sat in the living room sharing stories and laughter, Dorothy mentioned something that made everyone fall silent. "Judith, I drove past your old church, St. Matthew's, yesterday, and I saw Thomas and Rebecca in the parking lot. They looked different, older, Sadder, maybe. Do you ever wonder how they're doing? The question hung in the air like incense, heavy with implications and possibilities. Did I wonder about my children? Did I worry about their well-being? Did I regret the choices that had led to our separation? I pray for them every night, I said quietly. I pray that they'll find happiness that doesn't depend on taking advantage of other people. I pray that they'll learn to build relationships based on love rather than what they can extract from them. And I pray that someday they'll understand that the greatest gift I ever gave them was refusing to enable their selfishness. Margaret reached over and squeezed my hand. That's the most loving thing a mother can do. Love her children enough to let them face the consequences of their choices. As the evening wound down and my friends prepared to leave, Linda's granddaughter Amy approached me with the shy hesitation of a young person asking for wisdom from an elder. Dr. Walker, can I ask you something personal? How did you find the strength to cut off your children when they were treating you so badly? I mean, doesn't every instinct tell a mother to keep trying, keep forgiving, keep hoping they'll change? I considered her question carefully, remembering the agony of those early days when I had wavered between self-protection and maternal obligation. Amy, I had to learn the difference between love and enabling. Real love sometimes requires saying no to people we care about. Real love sometimes means allowing people to experience the consequences of their poor choices. And sometimes, the most loving thing we can do is refuse to participate in our own destruction. She nodded thoughtfully. My mom always says that boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're gates that let the right people in. After everyone left, I stood in my kitchen washing dishes and reflecting on the transformation of my life. The woman who had been devastated by her children's betrayal had become someone who mentored young doctors, supported other elderly abuse survivors, and created beauty and meaning in small daily rituals. I thought about the path that had led me here, the overheard conversation that shattered my illusions, the legal battles that taught me to fight for myself, the support group that showed me I wasn't alone, the volunteer work that reminded me of my purpose. Each painful step had been necessary to bring me to this place of peace and fulfillment. The phone rang, interrupting my meditation. I almost didn't answer. It was nearly 10 o'clock, late for social calls, but something prompted me to pick up. Grandma Judith? The voice was tentative, female, young. This is Emma, Rebecca's daughter. I'm sorry to call so late, but I wanted to talk to you before I lose my courage. My heart stopped. Emma, my granddaughter, the girl in the graduation photo who had asked about me. Emma, sweetheart, it's wonderful to hear your voice. How are you? I'm confused, Grandma. About what happened between you and Mom and Uncle Thomas. They say you've lost your mind, that you're not the same person anymore. But Jake says that's not true. He says you're exactly the same, just stronger. I closed my eyes, praying for the right words to help this young woman navigate the complicated terrain of family loyalty and truth. Emma, what do you think? When you remember me from when you were younger, what do you remember? I remember you teaching me to bake cookies. I remember you reading me stories. I remember you explaining why the sky is blue and how flowers grow. I remember you being really smart and really kind. Her voice broke slightly. I remember feeling safe with you. Do those memories suggest someone who couldn't take care of herself? There was a long pause. No, they don't. Grandma, I'm 18 now. I'm starting college in the fall. Mom wanted me to major in business, but I want to study psychology. I want to help people who've been hurt by their families. The irony was so profound, I almost laughed. Rebecca's own daughter wanted to dedicate her life to healing the kind of damage Rebecca had inflicted. Emma, that's a beautiful calling. The world needs more people who understand family dynamics and can help others heal from family trauma. Grandma, can I ask you something? Would you want to have coffee with me sometime? Just the two of us? I promise I won't tell Mom or Uncle Thomas. I just want to understand what really happened. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks as I realized that God was offering me something I had never dared to hope for. A relationship with one of my grandchildren that wasn't filtered through their parents' manipulation and lies. Emma, I would love nothing more than to have coffee with you, but I need you to understand something. I love you and I love your mother, but I can't have a relationship with people who tried to steal my independence and dignity. That doesn't mean I don't care about your family's well-being. It means I love myself enough to protect myself from further harm. I understand, Grandma. Or at least, I think I'm starting to. We made plans to meet the following Saturday at a small cafe near the university. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year. Hope for a family connection that wasn't based on what I could provide financially, but on genuine affection and mutual respect. That night, as I knelt beside my bed for my evening prayers, I thanked God for the unexpected gift of Emma's call, for the courage to maintain my boundaries while leaving the door open for authentic relationship, and for the wisdom to recognize that sometimes redemption comes through the next generation, rather than the current one. Father, I whispered, if it be your will, help me build a relationship with Emma that shows her what healthy family love looks like. Help me be the grandmother she needs without compromising the boundaries I need, and continue to bless the work I'm doing to help other women find their strength and dignity. As I settled into bed, I reflected on the strange mathematics of loss and gain. I had lost the children I thought I had, but I had gained a community of women who truly valued my friendship. I had lost financial relationships based on manipulation, but I had gained the opportunity to fund young doctors who would heal the world. I had lost the illusion of unconditional family love, but I had gained the reality of God's unconditional love and my own hard-won self-respect. Most importantly, I had learned that it's never too late to choose who you want to be, regardless of who others want you to be. I had discovered that sometimes the greatest act of faith is trusting God enough to let go of relationships that diminish your spirit, even when those relationships involve people you've loved your entire life. Tomorrow would bring my coffee date with Emma, the first tentative step toward what might become a healthy intergenerational relationship. Next month would bring my lecture at the medical school, an opportunity to share what I'd learned about dignity and advocacy in elder care. Next year would bring new scholarship recipients, new volunteer opportunities, new ways to transform my pain into purpose. The future stretched ahead of me like an unwritten prayer, full of possibility and promise, and the peace that comes from knowing you've chosen truth over convenience, dignity over desperation, and God's love over human approval. Have you ever experienced something like this in your own life, or known someone whose family tried to take advantage of them in their older years? How did faith help you or them find the strength to set boundaries? If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this message, please like and subscribe so it can reach someone who needs to hear it today. May God bless everyone who's been through something like this. In Jesus' name, amen.